Dale is, I think, of the whole group, in a sense, the furthest along in terms of formal education, because you've done a master's and you're now in a PhD program.
Yeah, EDD program.
EDD, but it's a PhD program.
Right.
We don't want to allow people in education the same prestige that those of us at PhD.
I hear that a lot, actually. We're looked as the second-class citizens if you have an EDD as opposed to a PhD, but
Screw that.
I mean, I guess one of the things I could say about the doctoral program that I'm at the University of Southern California right now, is that what you get here in terms of like the critical analysis, you guys wouldn't be here if you didn't love learning. Like if it didn't come, not easily, but I mean, like if you didn't have the work ethic to like, drive you through it, like the drive for success, like, the refusal to like fail at whatever it is that you're attempting to do at something that you're really good at, or you guys wouldn't be here without that. There isn't a ton of like intellectual curiosity. People aren't like, just completely driven by what they're learning. Some of the people are just kind of in there to, as a means to, become administrators or, like their, career path or something like that. But I mean, like, what we're talking about in terms of like the master's degree is like, it's so important to learn, like while you're there to really feel like, you have a connection to the material. But what's great about our education is that like what will happen in a master's program, and for me in my PhD program right now, is like you will become your own professor. Like you will find what you need, to learn and become, voracious in the readings that you feel are really important to you. I did a lot of studying about gifted programs and how students of color are largely not identified for gifted programs, and how many gifted programs strictly identify giftedness in terms of IQ and in terms of like test scores, but evolving the concept of what giftedness means, like, are you great at, acquiring languages? Are you an intensely funny kid? Like, I think of somebody, because, you have to process, comedy and laughter in a way that is translatable and, accessible to other people and, and culturally relevant. Like if you saw somebody like Biggie Smalls or Tupac, and somebody that was completely vulgar in their expression of language, but at the same time that you saw that, like, the interlocking of like the syntax and everything was like so magical, like, teachers sometimes completely tune that out, that, this kid, he cusses all damn day long, but like he's really great at putting it together. So like evolving, what giftedness means, and for me, like, that was a really passionate thing. So like, I'm in the process of like trying to develop, what that is, and for me, when I first started my program, like I hadn't found my current job as an autism teacher yet. So I was like so bored because I had done all the reading and I had done everything I wanted to do. I started writing a screenplay about like, what this means, like, because so like everybody else is like dying, like, oh, there's so much work. We have two-page papers due on the same day, and I'm like, shut up, like get over that, get the readings done, and like, like I had to give myself more work in order to feel more challenged, and like, being here, you guys doing the second you step out of those doors, like your work ethic and what you guys have already been through is going to put you 10 times ahead of where other people are at, like, and you'll be surprised what people accept as what is sufficient teaching. It will blow your mind. I've had people come into my room, like I said, I teach an autism class. I've had like supervisors from the district office come into my room, and as I'm teaching, like they do like the little walkthrough or whatever, and they left, and they told my supervisor, like, oh, I was just so surprised that you were doing any sort of teaching whatsoever, that you just didn't let them sit there and were babysitting for 6 hours a day. And sprawling urban school systems, like sometimes that is the expectation. And if you're not someone who is like, a really passionate teacher who cares about what's happening to the kids, because there are some shitty teachers out there, like if you're not someone who doesn't care about that and where it means something to you, then those kids will just sit there and, and their minds will rot, and they have no sort of development whatsoever. You know what I mean? So, creative spirit, like independentness. That's why you guys are here. You guys are the best. So like, you have so many talents and gifts, and right now, trying to figure out the best and most potent ways to use them, to express them. It's a great way to do it. So if you guys are feeling it, I'd say go for it.
Deborah, I would say a word about master's programs for a moment. If you look at all the master's program education in the country, virtually, and Bio really said this, but I want to spread it out a little bit. Virtually every university in the country has one. They're cash cows. You invest minimally in them because you make maximally back because teachers have to go to them. That's the basis for many schools of education, and they stink, quite bluntly. But there are actually excellent programs. Michael's example is a very important one. GW over the last 10 years has made itself into an absolutely first-rate school of education. In Boston, BC, and I hate to say it, my alma mater, Harvard, have done the same. I think they're both first-rate places now.
Oh, I have to plug George Mason because I've had a couple of
Good.
classes on there, and they are rapidly expanding. I think that the one thing we didn't hint at is within, like you're saying, every university has a Department of Education, and they have someone who has really delved into something very specific about education, and they're probably really good at it too. So if you encounter a school that is going to provide you with what you need in terms of a degree, you can really kind of shape it how you want it to turn out. I mean, if you really want to, if you see yourself becoming an administrator, you can go in that direction. If you feel like, you want to develop curriculum, and there's so many different things that you can do. It's out there, and you're going to find highly qualified people who are going to be able to guide you very well. But you probably have to jump through a lot of hoops along the way as well that are just already outlined probably by some public school district to say, like, you have to do this, this, and this.
In the fellow programs, or at least in mine, we were mandated which classes we had to take.
Right.
Well, there are two degrees here to separate. There's a first master's, which is a master's in teaching, however named, and they're named differently school by school. And then there's a subject-centered one, or a developmentally centered one. And usually you have to eventually you certainly have to get the first, and you have to get eventually the second. But it's the first I'm referring to. That is, places that promise to educate you to be a teacher. And many places aren't very good. But there are very good places. And I couldn't easily have said that 10 years ago. I spent 6 years working on revising the program at Northwestern, for instance. And when I went there, I actually had, for the first time in my life, I got to fire people. And I always wanted to fire people. I decided this was my ambition. And there were 20 teachers who were doing what were called the practice classes. And for high school, they were subject-centered and so on. They were the dullest, worst teachers. They hadn't been in a classroom themselves for 5, 6 years. This was a sideline, and they were teaching bad practice again and again. And they were all from the suburbs, and the jobs were all in the city, or in mixed districts in terms of the composition of students. And they weren't hiring students from Northwestern. And I went and I just observed all these classes, and I thought, I'm sitting through 2 hours of this class only because it's my job to do this. But I wouldn't spend 5 minutes in this classroom, so I fired them all. And hired people who were actually practicing teachers across the range of schools in Chicago and in the Chicago area. And right away, being in the presence of somebody who's actually practicing, first of all, makes a difference. And who's a veteran practitioner, not, these were not novices, they were veterans, but they were good teachers. So you can come back to me and Karen Sanchez-Uppo, but there are other resources also you can check with to find out about where you want to try to get a master's. TFA pays for you to get your master's degree, but if the school's too expensive, they only pay half. The best schools generally, where TFA is positioned, are more expensive. So it's worth it if you possibly can come up with the resources yourself and you go that route to go to one of the schools that is more expensive. It's not an absolute rule, by the way, but it is often very true. In New York, for instance, the Bank Street School of Education is probably the best school of education in the country. Goes through 8th grade, though. They don't do high school. But it's the most expensive in the city because it has no endowment, of course.